The first night away from home is something most people remember clearly, even years later. For me, it began with a quiet bus ride under a darkening sky. The city lights slowly faded as the bus moved forward, and with every mile, I felt both excited and afraid. I had waited for this moment for a long time, telling myself that I was ready. Still, when the bus finally stopped and I stepped down with my small bag, my heart beat faster than usual. The place was unfamiliar. The air smelled different, and the sounds around me felt strange. There were no familiar voices calling my name, no warm light from my home window. I stood there for a moment, holding my bag tightly, wondering if I had made the right decision. Then I took a deep breath and started walking toward the building where I would spend my first night. Inside, everything looked simple and clean, but also cold. The walls were plain, and the hallway seemed longer than it really was. My footsteps echoed as I walked, and each sound reminded me that I was alone. I reached my room, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The room was small, with a single bed, a table, and a window that looked out onto the street. I placed my bag on the floor and sat on the bed, listening to the quiet. At home, silence was comforting. Here, it felt heavy. I missed the familiar sounds of my family, the soft noise of people moving around, and even the small arguments that filled the air. I tried to tell myself that this was normal, that everyone feels this way on their first night. Still, the feeling did not disappear easily. I unpacked slowly, placing my clothes in the drawer and my books on the table. Each item reminded me of home, and for a moment, I felt closer to it. I opened the window and let some fresh air in. Outside, people were passing by, living their own lives, unaware of my thoughts. The streetlights glowed softly, and the night felt calm, almost peaceful. As the evening grew quieter, my thoughts grew louder. I wondered what the next days would be like. Would I make friends? Would I succeed, or would I fail? These questions moved through my mind without stopping. I lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to relax. The bed felt different from my own, and the pillow did not carry the familiar smell of home. I checked my phone and saw messages from my family wishing me luck. Reading their words made me smile, but it also made my chest feel tight. I wanted to reply with confidence, to say that everything was fine. Instead, I simply wrote that I was safe and that I would talk to them in the morning. I did not want them to worry. Turning off the light was harder than I expected. In the darkness, every small sound felt louder. A distant car, a door closing somewhere in the building, footsteps in the hallway. My imagination turned these normal sounds into something frightening. I pulled the blanket closer and reminded myself that I was not a child anymore. Slowly, I began to think about why I had come here. I wanted to grow, to learn, and to become independent. Staying comfortable at home would have been easy, but it would not have changed my life. This thought gave me some strength. I realized that fear was not a sign of weakness, but a sign that I was stepping into something new. Time passed, and my breathing became slower. The room no longer felt as cold as before. I started to notice small positive things. The bed was soft enough, the room was quiet, and I had everything I needed. I was safe. This simple realization brought a sense of calm. Before falling asleep, I remembered my first day at school as a child. I had been scared then too, holding my bag and looking around with uncertainty. But that fear had faded with time, replaced by routine and comfort. I told myself that this night was no different. It was just the beginning. Finally, sleep came gently. It was not deep or long, but it was enough. When I woke up briefly in the middle of the night, I noticed that the fear was no longer strong. It was still there, but softer, easier to manage. I closed my eyes again with a quiet sense of hope. By morning, sunlight filled the room, and everything looked different. The same walls that felt cold now looked warm. The unfamiliar place felt a little more like mine. As I got out of bed, I realized that I had survived my first night away from home. It was not perfect, and it was not easy, but it was an important step forward. That night taught me something valuable. Fear does not disappear immediately, but it loses its power when we face it. My first night was filled with nervous thoughts and quiet moments, but it also showed me that I was stronger than I believed. And with that understanding, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The first night in a new place often feels longer than any other night. For me, It began after the lights were turned off and the world outside the window slowly disappeared into darkness. The room was quiet, but my mind was not. I lay on the bed, listening to my own breathing, feeling the unfamiliar space around me. Every corner of the room felt strange, as if it were watching me adjust to its presence. I had imagined this moment many times before. I thought I would feel proud and confident, ready to begin a new chapter of my life. Instead, I felt small. The silence pressed against my ears, and the shadows on the walls seemed deeper than they should have been. I closed my eyes, hoping sleep would come quickly, but it did not. My thoughts returned again and again to home. I remembered the soft light in the living room, the familiar sounds of doors opening and closing, and the comfort of knowing that someone was always nearby. Here, there was only me. The distance between this place and my home felt much larger at night. It was not just a distance of miles, but a distance of emotions and habits built over many years. A sudden noise made me sit up. It was only the sound of water moving through pipes, but my heart raced as if danger were close. I realized how sensitive I had become to every sound. At home, I would not even notice such things. Here, each noise felt important, almost threatening. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that this was normal. New places always feel louder and more alive at night. I tried to distract myself by thinking about the future. I imagined waking up in the morning, starting my day, meeting new people, and learning new things. These thoughts were meant to comfort me, but they also brought new fears. What if I failed? What if I felt lonely every night? The questions had no answers, and that made them heavier. I stood up and walked slowly around the room. The floor felt cool under my feet. I touched the table, the chair, and the wall, trying to make the space feel more real, more familiar. I looked out of the window and saw a few lights still glowing in nearby buildings. Somewhere out there, other people were awake too, living their own stories. This thought made me feel a little less alone. I sat back down on the bed and picked up a book, hoping reading would calm my mind. I read the same page again and again without understanding the words. My thoughts kept pulling me away. Finally, I placed the book aside and lay down once more. I realized that fighting the fear was only making it stronger. Instead, I decided to accept it. I told myself that it was okay to feel afraid. It was okay to miss home. These feelings did not mean I was weak. They meant I cared, and that I was human. As soon as I stopped judging myself, something inside me relaxed. The room felt quieter, not because the sounds had stopped, but because my mind had slowed down. Time moved slowly, but it did move. The fear did not disappear completely, but it changed. It became less sharp, less powerful. I noticed that my body was tired, even if my mind was restless. My eyes felt heavy, and my breathing became steady. I held on to that rhythm, using it as an anchor. At some point, I drifted into a light sleep. My dreams were unclear, filled with mixed images of home and this new place. When I woke up again, I did not know how much time had passed. The room was still dark, but the fear was no longer waiting for me. Instead, there was a quiet emptiness, calm and gentle. I lay there, surprised by the change. The silence that once felt threatening now felt peaceful. I realized that nothing bad had happened. The night had passed, minute by minute, and I was still safe. This simple fact brought me comfort. I understood that fear often comes from imagination, not reality. As I waited for morning, I thought about all the first nights people experience in their lives. The first night at school, the first night at a new job, the first night in a new city. Each one feels difficult at the time, but later becomes just a memory. I knew that one day, I would look back at this night and smile. When the first light of dawn entered the room, everything changed. The shadows disappeared, and the room looked ordinary and friendly. The walls no longer felt cold, and the air felt fresh. I sat up and stretched, feeling a quiet sense of achievement. I had faced the night and learned something important. That first night taught me that fear is often strongest when we are alone with our thoughts. But it also taught me that fear does not last forever. With time, patience, and a little courage, it fades. As I got ready to start the day, I felt stronger than I had the night before. The place was still new, and challenges were still ahead. But I was no longer afraid of the night. I had learned that I could survive it, and that lesson stayed with me. My first night was filled with silence and fear, but it ended with understanding and hope, and that made all the difference.